Thank you so much, Isha. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining. What an August panel we have here today. Just in terms of setting the context for the panel, which we have named as Continuum, ensuring business continuity and jumpstarting growth, uh, let me sort of take 2 minutes to introduce the panel. Today, we are at the heart of the greatest disruption the world has ever seen. And while there is no doubt that businesses and economies have taken a serious hit during this time, what is incredible is that many companies are treating it as a catalyst for bringing transformation in their workforce, business models, and operations. As Intel's former CEO rightly said, bad companies are destroyed by crises, good companies survive them, great companies are defined by crises. And that's what we're witnessing today. A new world is emerging from the crisis, one where technology will serve as the greatest enabler and ally in effecting change where it is needed the most. As the crisis continues to accelerate digitization across industry, technology intervention and innovation is the key to bringing back growth, a truth that is agnostic of industry, business model, or region. Technology that was once seen as a tool for enhancement is now being viewed by many as a necessity for survival and success, serving as an enabler of possibility. With that, let me come to my first question to one of our August panel members, Mr. Samir Garde, who is the president of Indian SAARC for Cisco. The world has changed, Samir, in the last 6 months. What are some of the new behaviors, habits, and rules that are shaping your industry today? And what does this mean for you in terms of business model, supply chain, trade, etc.?
Hey, thanks Anirban, and thanks to everybody on the panel, and welcome to uh, this panel discussion. And Anirban, you're absolutely right. I think the pandemic is probably building a different world that will be shaped by new rules and new habits, which in turn are actually shifting consumer habits and consumer behaviors. There is a much larger commitment to health, hygiene, and more independence, more self-reliance. Learning new skills at home, for example, right? And I'm doing things which I never imagined I would do. Yet very, very digitally dependent at the same time. And from a business perspective, I think more and more organizations are switching to probably new business models and exploring new revenue streams, while turning the workforce and the workflows remotely. And all of these changes actually mean a demand for technology as a service, which is actually peaking at this point and will continue to do so over the next few years. In response, what we are doing is we are rebalancing our R&D investments to focus on key areas that will position us well for the future. So it's a story of divesting from areas which we believe may not have a very bright future in the short to the medium term, and reinvesting that in stuff that we believe will be the future. And a couple of areas that come to mind are security, collaboration. I think those are areas that will become much more important. And the last thing I'll say is that the new as a service move is driven by an acceleration to the consumption of technology as a service that we've seen in the last fiscal year, and especially getting accelerated in the last 6 months. So interestingly, we set out 5 years ago to say that 50% of our revenue will come from software and services. We closed last year in July at 51% of our business coming from software and services, for a company which was well known mostly for hardware. So we are transitioning and we are divesting in areas that may not make sense in the immediate term, and investing in areas which will make sense in the longer term.
Thank you so much for that, explaining that, Samir. And I think, everybody in the industry took note when Cisco changed its strategy, from moving from hardware to software. Uh, Coming to Mr. Bhargava, Mr. Bhargava, I would like to pose the same question to you. How are you seeing things change, if we so-called use the most abused and exploited term, after the new normal or in the new normal that's coming?
Well, a good afternoon to everybody. I think what has happened with this pandemic is that it has accentuated the virtues of good management, which have always been recognized but not always practiced. And I think now this is highlighted that certain things need to be done if you are going to have the kind of resilience and the ability to bounce back from crises, which keep happening, of course, of different magnitude over time. Nothing like the COVID magnitude, I hope, will happen again in the near future. But certainly, I think some crisis will happen, whether it's a financial crisis or a crisis of technology or some other crisis. Now, the government has been very keen on accelerating manufacturing in India, creating jobs. And the passenger car industry is an industry which does exactly that. The problems of this industry, like any other industry, when it comes to a crisis like what's happened, primarily it becomes very apparent that companies which are financially strong and whose supply base, supply chain, and the distribution network is financially strong are able to be getting back to business in a much quicker and easier way than companies who have to run around getting loans restructured and finding ways of raising money and such things. Again, I think it's necessary that companies become much more flexible than what they have been in the past. They don't remain as rigid as they have been because today, as Samir said, you have to use technology in many ways for becoming more productive, losing a lot of slack, cutting down on waste, and various things to make yourself more efficient. And therefore, flexibility and the ability to use technology. And the third important thing this is highlighted is that companies who have over the years built a culture of focusing on safety, focusing on health related issues, have fared better in this crisis and dealing with what has happened than companies who have been negligent about the safety aspect. So keeping all these in view, I think businesses in future should focus on all of these aspects I've mentioned, whether it's the transportation sector or any other business. I think the virtues of building strong companies, being flexible, strengthening your supply chain, using technology will remain issues which will be very relevant as we go forward.
Points noted, sir. Technology obviously is, redefining all the industries. Uh, Moving on to Mr. Surana. Mr. Surana, how are you seeing your industry react to this?
Yeah, good afternoon to you and everybody, the esteemed member of the panel. Oil and gas industry before the COVID came was also going through a little bit of changes in terms of the customer preferences, in terms of the environmental activisms, in terms of supply demand dynamics, some geopolitical issues, and it was seeing a lot of volatility. COVID came as a double swan to oil industry as such when already there was surplus inventories in the market and all of a sudden the demand collapsed. It gave rise to, at one end, the sudden disturbances in the total pricing mechanism of crude pricing, which you might have seen, an abnormal low, leading to volatility in the market and sudden collapse of the demand. That was one issue which happened. But the second issue which happened, which many people may not be aware that there was a mismatch between demand of various products. So like a refinery produces various products, but all of a sudden the demand for items like LPG went up and the demand for petrol, diesel and other industrial products went down. The third thing which had happened was that unlike any other people, there were certain commodities which were essentially required and required more during this period because everybody is at home. So everybody wanted their kitchens to be on. So we saw a sudden jump in the demand of LPG and the collapse in demand of petrol and diesel. The fourth important element was that our industry works into a substantial cash flow every day. So the amount of money which rotates from the supplier to retail outlet, back to the customer and the consumer and back to the company. And now you contract the crude and the products around 2 months before. So those cargoes will be coming and there are credit terms which you need to pay. But the receivables will all of a sudden will collapse when 50% of the demand gets dispatched. So there was all of a sudden the liquidity issues within the oil industry. And connected with this was also an issue when you are required to deliver the essential commodities at the residence of the people. There is a concerns about the health of our own workforce, our own employees. And at the same time, while the individuals may like their LPG cylinder to be delivered, but there may be resistance from the societies and the villages for the people to be entering those places. So we were in a very, very peculiar situation to handle very, very different and divergent requirements on our industry. But as Mr. Bhargava was saying, that the resilience of the industry get tested in this type of situation, and I think the oil industry got tested fully. Our supply chain mechanism got substantially tested in that. Just to give a thing that around 71 crore LPG cylinders were delivered during this pandemic time from April to today. Almost around 55 lakh cylinders per day we were delivering to the people in different parts of the country at remote places. And it needs a whole supply chain right from refineries to LPG bottling plants, so truck, bulk movement, and because there is a personal handling of the LPG cylinder, people also got worried where there is a touch, there is no touch. And because it is a lot of business is the cash business, it is at the petrol pumps and all, there was worry about the cash payment. So these were the total changes. And in addition to that, even where the essential people were coming to the service, there was a preference for personal vehicles and the public transport, and that is continuing so. The second issue is lot of projects which we do at the sites, all of a sudden the migrant workers, the contract laborers and were required to be spended. So one thing was to handle them, and second thing is to go to site. So these were the challenges which were faced. But to the strength of the industry, to the strength of the company and the team which we had, we ran all our operating locations. At least HPCL ran 100% of the capacity when the refinery, so some of the people were required to cut down the refinery throughputs, and we could meet the demand of the essential commodities. But not to say that it did not taught us something. This pandemic taught us a lot of things, in the sense that a lot of things which can be done from the remote areas, we never thought that it can be done in the remote mode or on the virtual mode or on the digital mode. And especially being the government sector, we were more used to a work which is more like an office environment, and a distributed and remote working from home was slightly unusual for us. And we learned a lot during this period to how to leverage the technology and do a lot of things which otherwise we thought may not be possible.
Thank you so much for those wonderful insights. And talking about supply chain, as Mr. Bhargava said and Mr. Surana said, and Samir also hinted to it, in a very short while. Coming to Mr. Agarwal, you had probably faced the brunt of trade and supply chain the most, and yet your ports were operational. So two questions quickly to you. One is, again, as how are you seeing your businesses changing, and how are they getting impacted because of this new normal?
So I think we are all in between all the industry, because we are basically, providers of service. All imports and exports which happen go through the ports. So we had a huge challenge because we had to keep everything operational from the day one. So I think it was very important that we kept the morale of our teams very high. Luckily for us, most of our ports are in remote, or you can say that not in the metro cities. So they were in smaller locations where Corona came much later. So though the threat was there, and there was a lot of resistance from the families and the communities to allow people to work. But in spite of heavy mechanization that we have, there is a huge element of human intervention which is required when we are dealing with large quantities running into millions of tons of materials which move through our system. So I think we did a great job. All our ports were operational in India, and also we operate a terminal in UK, and all of them were operational. People were very proactive. We also saw in this period that the usual things of working from home and working from remote, and working with minimalistic kind of human resources. We were able to probably and many places where we had to keep the staff in the offices, provide them full security, key operators, etc., workers also in the premises. So I think all in all we managed. And in the first month, which was basically end of March, early April, the problem was more where the numbers also plunged, but still the operations are on. I think we learned a lot, like everyone else, and our systems, our mechanized and electronic systems were tested to the hilt, and I'm proud to say that we gave full service to all our customers. And though the numbers may have come down in the first month, but that was not because we could not give service.
Mr. Agarwal, sir, you've gone on mute.
Okay, so basically, I think we worked together, and all our systems worked well. And in spite of the volumes going down in the initial phases, we were able to bounce back very quickly in the second and third month, where we almost reached 90% of our handling capacity. And that was more because the demand started picking up. Our customers started moving, like refineries, power plants, steel plants, all of these infrastructure-related industries, which were the first ones to start or never stop. For example, refineries never stopped, and steel plants never stopped, power plants never stopped. So, we were having a good position that our customers were always operational, and together we managed the whole show. So I think it's a great learning, and we are still, at it, dealing with it. Now the pandemic has reached the smaller places also, like all of our, people who are here would know, the business leaders, that now even the smaller cities are affected. So it is more difficult sometimes seeing that, a lot of our people are getting affected now who are working at the ground level. So that's another challenge.
So points taken. Quickly moving on because we are running short of time. Mr. Bhatia, as Sami started off and kicked off the discussion with technology, you yourself are a technology solutions provider. So quickly, could you tell us how your business has changed or disrupted in a way, and how?
Yeah. So good afternoon, everybody. I think as you rightly, my esteemed panelists shared a lot of great insights, and obviously we being a technology company and supporting all the esteemed panelists in this company, it was also a very, very big learning for us. I mean, lot has kind of changed in the last 6 months, as we all know. But the one big thing which we feel is, I see it is happening is there's going to be a huge focus on safety and hygiene at our workplace. And I think that is going to kind of remain in the society for good. And, as we said, we heard this word new normal so many times. So I think that is what is going to remain. And we as Emerson obviously are making sure, first of all, that we, support and ensure our employees are, we are always, safety has been our core value. We'll continue to drive that. And as Bhargava said, all those companies who are strong in safety and financially strong actually emerge very well. So there is one big thing which I'm going to, we are going to see as we move forward. And obviously, to drive safety, automation will play a big role. And, as we all know, I think digital transformation has been playing, in India. It has been accelerating at a great pace for last 10 years, the way I see it. But what I'm seeing post-pandemic, that even the small and medium enterprises who were earlier kind of slow at embracing this are coming forward on a very, very with lot of interest, and they would really like to go forward. So that is going to be a big change as we move forward, in the business. And obviously, we as a technology supplier see a great opportunity there to work with these small and middle enterprises as well. And another important kind of behavioral change, I think, is the Atmanirbhar Bharat, which our honorable Prime Minister has been kind of promoting. I think that is going to change big way. We will become a country which will be propelling the development of later localized solutions to drive growth and stability. And although I am, Emerson is a multinational corporation, but we are heavily invested in India, and we say we are global yet local. So we, whatever we may, supply to our customer today, 80%, is make in India. And I think that is what is going to continue. And we will see a lot of localized solutions come up, be it from local players or from multinational like us. And, the one thing which I feel should be a big lesson learned, of course, we learned a lot. But one thing, when the whole industry was unlocking, some of our plants had met with some very, unfortunate accidents in the chemical and other place. And I think that is something which has been a big eye opener for many of the, the executives in this sector. And I'm seeing that the importance of automation in safe operation has been really becoming a big focus area. And I think we as Emerson would like to make sure that we drive that message very well, that, there is no cost of safety, actually, of safe behavior. So, make sure that
So sorry to intercept you there. We're just running a little short on time. Just to be able to complete the panel on time and have all the questions to everybody. Point taken, sir. Safety has no cost. Automation is playing a big role in terms of providing worker safety. And continuing with the thought, I'd like to come back to Samir. Samir, Cisco has a large clientele, right? And obviously the new normal has changed a lot for a lot many industries. What trends are you seeing across industries in terms of your clientele? And another interesting aspect is that because of the new normal, because of the government imposing lockdown to sort of stop the coronavirus from spreading, a lot of people have moved into work from home mode, which obviously means you will have to provide, as Cisco, a lot of cybersecurity solutions to your clientele as well. If you could weigh in on those two questions quickly.
Yeah. So let me just start with the second question first, Anirban. And I think a great testament of what this country was able to do was when 4.5 million IT workers across the country moved to work from home in a matter of days, not weeks or months, right? And a lot of industry veterans or companies actually came together to make that happen. I remember the first, it seems like very far back, but it was just around 5.5 months ago when all of us were struggling to get people to look at moving home in a secure manner. So what we are seeing is, initially, I think there was a tremendous amount of spend across all industries on collaboration software, collaboration solutions to help people to start working from home, basically get productive from home. Then we saw a little bit of a pause. I would be very honest in saying we saw a little bit of pause in spending where people said, okay, this works. Now we need to ensure that the devices, the users, the applications, which are now exposed in the house to the internet, need to be secured. So we saw a significant spurt in wanting to spend on cybersecurity. And that continues even today. In fact, we believe that the discussion or the cybersecurity agenda is no longer a CIO or a CISO agenda. It's actually gotten elevated to the level of the board in a manner which we've not seen before. And most of the stalwarts on this panel would probably see this. And it's not about the technology of cybersecurity, but it's about the risk that it poses if you don't take the right action. On your first question, I would say it's the hurt and the growth across industries is uneven, I would say, right? Clearly, retail has got very badly impacted. Travel and hospitality has got very badly impacted. But they're all trying to figure out ways in which they can reinvent themselves. But as you can probably imagine, e-commerce globally it took us around 25 years to go from 6% of total retail to around 16% of total retail for e-commerce. And in the last 6 months, that 16% has jumped to 27% globally from an e-commerce point of view, right? So nearly a third of retail today is e-commerce. So that's a very big change that we're seeing. We're seeing obviously a tremendous amount of interest in cloud-based technologies. We are obviously seeing phenomenal interest in OTT players who have gone through the roof. And interestingly, I think we've seen banking and financial institutions investing continuously during the last 6 months on technology. So I would say it's been an uneven play, but it's been an interesting thing to look at how companies are adapting to this environment.
Thank you so much for the Samir. And since we have so many stalwarts in this panel, and as Samir mentioned, I would like to come to all of you guys one by one. Mr. Bhargava, how are you seeing? You spoke about Maruti sort of adapting to the new normal in the beginning. How are you sort of seeing technology such as cybersecurity being implemented in Maruti, and how are you using technology to sort of outmaneuver the pandemic?
Well, our core business, of course, does not change very much in the way we manufacture a car. But where things are changing are in a lot of the support activities. In the area of marketing cars, we find that in this last 3 months or so since we have started activities, the number of digital inquiries which we are getting compared to last year are somewhere between 2 and 3 times every month. Huge jump in the digital inquiries which are coming in. The number of people who are coming in and making personal inquiries or making inquiries over the telephone and things has reduced slightly, but not much, by about 10% or so. But the difference one sees is in the digital area. Of course, all our meetings and things are all done now on one of these platforms. In fact, we use Samir's platforms more than anything else. And that's become a big change. We can connect up to the entire vendor community, for example, join in on meetings. And that runs to some 700-800 people. And with their also number 2s and number 3s, sometimes you have 2,000 people joining in for a meeting. The noteworthy thing is that the attendance at all these meetings now is almost 100%. The earlier meetings, you could never get that high a percentage of people attending meetings. Today, there's hardly any absentee in a meeting because most people are at home, and it's very difficult to find an excuse not to join a meeting if you're at home. So that's happening there. We are using technology to monitor the health of our people and what's happening. But other than that, we were already using, we have been online with our vendors, with our dealers, with our bankers. That has been there for many years now. And that continues because it works much more efficiently. But if you take it all this overall, there has been an increase in technology, but our manufacturing systems will remain what they are. They use, of course, robotics and they use automation, that kind of technology, but not any major change is happening because of the pandemic.
So quickly, I wanted to ask you, since I have you here, is, how are you sort of planning to sort of work with the government, and what kind of a growth recovery you're going to see for the automobile business in the coming times? Because we're already seeing some amount of recovery coming from tier one, tier two cities. How do you expect the growth curve? What shape of the growth curve do you expect?
I don't know about shapes of growth curve, but actually a bigger recovery is happening in the tier three and the rural areas. The demand for cars and the retailing of cars has increased faster in what is defined as rural areas for us. The need to work with government has always been there. The automobile industry has been undergoing a lot of regulatory changes, and regulatory changes, their timing, how they're implemented, what the impact will be, these have to be continuously discussed between the industry and the government. And that continues to happen because we see more changes coming. Where I think today there is a problem which we need, and we are not sure exactly when and how serious it will be, because the uncertainties in the economies are very much there. But at the moment, the car demand is as good as it was last year. We expect that, for example, in October, when the festival season comes and there are no holidays in October, we could very well reach as high a production level as we have reached ever in the past, because the supply chain and the working systems in the factories and all are working perfectly normally now, with, of course, all these safety measures and the protocols for safety in place. But after December, when we expect that this impact of the past hangover of demand either starts petering out, what would be the situation for demand is very hard. In the last few years, the cost of the cars has gone up for a number of reasons. The implementation of new regulatory measures moving up to BS6, both in safety and emission, has added substantially to cost. The taxes imposed by state governments, not GST, but state governments have gone up. And the cumulative effect of all of that has been the acquisition cost of cars has become much higher. And it's not the COVID which saw the fall in demand happening. We mustn't forget that in 1920, the demand for cars actually fell by 18%. Industry was growing at about 6-7% a year. Against that, suddenly, and that was because of the number of factors, including what I just mentioned, the sales demand dropped by 20%, and then 18%, and then came the COVID and the pandemic, which further has created problems, because sooner or later the impact of lower income with people, the lower amount of disposable money with them, will have an impact. And if you have higher cost product and lower purchasing power, I can't see how it will not affect demand. Unfortunately, our economic situation is such that in the short run, I don't think anybody visualizes a rapid increase in economic activities which will quickly put more money into the pockets of the people. And the only answer, therefore, is that we have to rely on government help to increase the availability of purchasing power with the people, to increase the affordability of cars. Otherwise, whether it's going to start happening from January or February or March next year, I do foresee that we could have a situation where again production will come down because demand has fallen down.
वेबएक्स इस पे चल रहा है ब्राउजर पे
Thank you, Mr. Bhargava.
फर्स्ट वाला जो सबसे पहले दिया था ना वो
Thank you, Mr. Bhargava, for this wonderful insights. Quickly moving on, since we have very less time, to Mr. Surana.
एमके सुकरना ये सब ज्वाइन किए भार्गवा
Mr. Surana, how do you see?
समझ गया ठीक अपने पेज पे भेजा क्या
Hey, somebody needs to go on mute, Anirban. If you don't tell them, they won't know. Somebody on the live team needs to go on mute.
Thank you, Samir, for that.
ठीक है मैं बोलता हूँ
Guys, we can hear you on the live feed. Please go on mute. Okay, I think no, there's a lot of disturbance, guys, at the back end. Please fix this. Okay, I think we're back on track. Sorry for this technical disturbance. Mr. Surana, I was just trying to ask you, how are you seeing, growth coming back? And then obviously you said that, you're focusing on safety, you're focusing on operations. How are you using technology to sort of, break free from the pandemic and accelerating towards growth?
So if you recall, in month of April, the demand of petroleum had come down almost to less than 50%. The petrol was almost 39%, diesel was 45%, and aviation fuel was almost 8%. But as the relaxation were announced and gradually the things started picking up, the demand recovery was much faster than what any of us had expected. Rather, it was sharper than what was anticipated originally. And as of August, almost the total petroleum products demand was almost in the range of 85 to 90%. In fact, LPG demand was more than 100%. And if I see the September month, the petrol demand is almost is higher than what it was the same month last year, almost 100%. And even diesel demand is almost to the 91%. And aviation fuel demand has picked up to around 44%. So the demand has picked up, but also I would like to mention that there are certain activities which are yet to pick up. So while the petrol, diesel, which are petrol, which is more mobility fuel, and that demand is added by the more people using their personal vehicles than the private than the public transport, and the things offices etc. is starting back. So that demand is picked up. Diesel demand has come up to 91%, but for the last 10% to pick up, we need a pickup in the industrial activity and the construction activities. And as the more relaxation happens, as these activities pick up, I'm sure that the demand will reach to 100% in, let's say, by the last quarter of this financial year. I suppose so. Also, there will be a festive season will be kicking up in the country in the month of November, October. So that should bring up some demand back. So I see that as far as recovery in the demand is concerned, it's good, and we expect it to reach to normalcy sooner, maybe in another quarter's time. As far as the change in the business working is concerned, as I had mentioned earlier, that we needed changes at many levels. So while there were technological changes in terms of crude mix change to have different products outputs depending on the requirement, there were changes required in terms of the crude contracting patterns. There were also technological innovation were there. How do you sanitize the whole LPG cylinder, the filled up LPG cylinder? The whole truck goes through a sanitation process so that every cylinder gets sanitized before it is delivered. Then there was a special focus on cashless payments. In fact, HPCL launched a unified payment solution in the name of HP Pay so that all customers can go log into the same platform and do that, because the contactless payments were required. our industry is such where we realize one more mode that while the technology is anyway highly technological intensive industry, but we realize that there is something which the technology cannot replace, and like the operation crew, and so we needed changes in their method of working, different SOPs, and also because they were essential staff, they need to operate. We did start a portal sort of paramarsh where we put certain experts who to give the support and advices to the people if they have got any issues, how to handle that. And in terms of project sites and all, we needed different pattern of working because the migrant labor mix got changed, the mismatch of the skill sets were there. And we also needed the social distancing norms, the entry exit point. Just to give an example, like one of our project site had got around 20,000 people working on the site. So we had a biometric entry access system. But now because of the contact is to be avoided, we need to change that access pattern and also sort of distribute their entries and exits and lunch times, etc. So those type of changes were required and have been made. Going forward, I do see a change in the demand pattern because more people will be tempted to use the personal vehicles. That should enhance the demand. At the same time, there will be a pattern of a lot of people working from home. So there will be these two contradictory patterns which will operate the demand as far as the transportation fuels are concerned. At the same time, the industrial activities and the construction activities need to pick up, and at least the government is doing a lot of efforts in the oil sector itself. We have got the projects worth 5,60,000 running as of today, and there is a specific push to restart, and many of the projects have restarted effective 20th of April when the relaxations were given. And I'm sure that that should bring in the economic activities and the push. And the industrial activities also, like we saw a sudden increase in the demand of lubricant oils. And the demand for lubricant oils from April to July this year is almost crossed the same of the last year. So there is a pickup in the demand, and we hope it to happen further. As far as the other part of technology is concerned, that is the office technologies, we were not using a lot of VC, lot of virtual meetings, lot of artificial learnings, as far as the simulators and the remote working pattern. But we learned it, and I think some of that will become permanent now. And
so sorry, in the interest of time, because we have one last round of questions to go for all the panelists,
yeah.
I would, if you could just quickly make your point. 15
yeah,
seconds.
so I was just saying that some of these technologies which we have adopted now and we have got used to it will definitely become a part of the permanent setup, and it will bring the cost efficiency because a lot of travels will get avoided, and even a lot of efficiency comes in the utilization of the time of the people, as Mr. Bhargava also mentioned in terms of meetings, etc. And also some of the technologies, because some of the inspections and all we have started doing through remote mode now, which we were not doing earlier. So it will be a combination of technology and the human.
I think we've lost Mr. Surana. While till the time he comes back, quickly, Mr. Agarwal, how are you sort of seeing, the sort of growth recovery to happen, and how have you inducted technology to make sure that you're sort of ahead of the pandemic?
See, what we also see is that each of our customers are facing their own challenges in their industry. Because it's not just the pandemic; it's also that the EVs are coming in. Then there is the world is moving away from fossil fuel, and many of our customers are these people who will have their own challenges. So we are now trying to see how to diversify our customer base, how to diversify our product base, how to increase the spread from just being a port operator to offer more services to be a logistics player. And so we have, embarked on completely a different journey where in our meetings, because nowadays we are much more closer. We are having a daily meeting with all my senior guys on a call for 1 hour. and we are discussing from the initial stages where we were seeing how to operate and how to cut costs. Now we are looking at how to supplement our revenue. And from a stage where we said that, okay, in this year, 2021, how can we maintain no growth but no decline budget? Next year, we are looking at a huge growth. And, from various, these new areas that I mentioned. And so everyone has been given, some time to come back and come back with some innovative thoughts. So we are just trying to reverse the cycle by saying that to be a contrarian and say that instead of seeing how to reduce the decline, but how to say double our profitability. So we are working on such a goal, and even if we are not able to double, but even if we are able to increase it by 20-30%, I think it will be a huge effort in this in this time. So what we are seeing is that this change is going to be for permanent. So we cannot blame economy. We cannot blame demand not being there, because I think the demand is shifting. There's a huge shift, and like our esteemed panelists said, the demand and consumer behavior has been shifting even before the pandemic came in. The younger generation doesn't want houses or cars, and so, but again, there is a shift actually where now they want, because of the insecurity which has been created, people want houses of their own, and they also want cars because they feel that it is safer to travel by your own car. So, but I think, there are a lot of changes which we expect in the coming years. Preparing ourselves to deal with those changes, and that's what we are doing.
Thank you for making those points. Anil, I'll come to you in just 2 minutes, because we're on the topic of digital transformation. I wanted to ask Samir, how are you sort of seeing digital transformation happening across India? Because we sort of started late. We were told that we're a promised market in terms of adapting technology faster than anybody. How are you seeing adoption of digital transformation across your clients, and what faculties of technology are they sort of looking to imbibe faster? Samir, you're on mute.
I don't quite agree that India has been behind. Actually, if you look at it, India has actually been at the forefront of driving some digital innovation. I think there aren't too many countries around the world where you have 1.3 billion people on a biometric identity. There aren't too many countries around the world where you have 500 million people on a payment system which is universal in nature. So I think we made some massive strides in that from a government point of view. We have 600 million people on the internet, which is just second to China, and we'll probably overtake them. So I think the base has been set for a very strong digital transformation in this country. From an industry standpoint, I would say after the initial, like I mentioned earlier, work from home and cybersecurity, I think the focus has shifted to customer experience. So you heard Mr. Bhargava talked about how the number of digital inquiries have gone up 2 to 3x. Right now, if after buying the car, what kind of post-purchase experience do you want to give that customer? We are seeing a lot more investment in that area. We are seeing a tremendous amount of investment in AI and ML to manage customer engagements from a bot point of view. We are seeing, given the fact that a lot of people are working from home, employee experience and employee health initiatives from a digital point of view have seen a tremendous amount of interest. And lastly, I would say, today the world is all about software and applications. So how do you ensure that applications that our customers are using, our users are using, and our small and medium businesses are using continue to work with resilience through the course of a 24/7 kind of an environment, right? So I think those are some of the things that we are thinking about: application experience, user experience or customer experience, and employee experience from a digital transformation point of view.
Thank you so much, Samir, for those making those points. Mr. Bhatia, same question to you. as I asked Samir, and along with, how are you seeing your clients sort of, outmaneuver the pandemic?
Okay. So what we are seeing again, post-pandemic, as I, earlier said, what Samir said very well, that India has been on the forefront of digital transformation. I think in the last 10 years, we have seen enormous giant leap. What we are seeing now is lot of focus on coming on how to, optimize your productivity, be reliable, don't, spoil the environment, and be safe. And these are the four pillars, we are also driving. And most importantly, I would like to say the softwares will be playing the key role. Emerson as a company was first recognized as like Samit said, we were like we were into pervasive sensing company, but today it has become a software company. And as we move forward, what I'm seeing is that every organization will be getting there. And as many of the panelists said, it will all be about how to be more productivity, to be more productive, be more safe, reliable, and of course, do not impact the environment. So I think these four areas will continue to drive the post-pandemic time, and it was already there active earlier, but now I think post-COVID it is going to go at a much faster pace. That's what I can see.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bhatia, for making those points. I think we've run out of time and we're coming to a close of the panel. You've heard from the stalwarts themselves say how they're managing their businesses and their clients' businesses post the pandemic. Stay tuned for more such great discussions at ETGBS. Over to you, Isha, and thank you all panelists.